Every year, parents entrust their students to a school system that is responsible for preparing them for the future. But in some communities around the world, this dream of a better future has died. I believe that hope with action can become the boom that breaks through the sound barrier of this hopelessness. Now, this is personal for me. A few years ago, I had the privilege of taking my son to school. And I said to him, "How's it going?" He's like, "Oh, Dad, it's just another day." And I looked at him, "It's just another day." Now, I wasn't trying to judge his experience in high school based on my experience in high school. But here he was living in the best zip code in our town, getting a private school education with no assistance, no discounts, and the best he can muster up is, "Dad, it's just another day." There was no zip, no zest, no zeal. It was just kind of like, whatever. And as I looked in his eyes, I could see the very life being sucked out of him because there was no anticipation or expectation to learn anything new. So I dropped him off at school, and I went back home, and I picked up his sister to take her to public school. And as we were in the car, I said to her, "Tell me, what do you love about school?" And she said, "Dad, I love school because I get to see my friends." And I was like, I almost drove off the road, but I kept a poker face. And I said, "Tell me more." And she said, "Dad, I love seventh period because it's my science class, and the teacher always teaches us something new, and we have fun." So I decided to flip the question, and I said, "What don't you like about school?" And she said, "Dad, school is boring, and we don't have any fun." So I dropped her off, and as I was driving away, I started thinking, where have I failed as a parent? But here was the shocker. Both her and her brother had made the honor roll, thanks to their mother. But school for them, they could take it or leave it. They were kind of like, whatever. And I said to myself, as a parent, what is it going to take to create a boom and break the surround sound of not loving school? What is it going to take? And that question led me to Dr. Marceta Reilly, who's a 40-year educator. And as she and I began to talk in dialogue, we discovered that we thought a lot alike. We were both on the same page. And that conversation that we had together led us to the National Association of Secondary School Principals and a conversation with Dr. Beverly Hutton. And they gave us access to 22 principals, I would call them breakthrough principals, all around the country, all around the world, who had found a way to be the boom and to break the sound barrier. As we began to talk to these educators, they were cut from a different cloth. They had a high disregard for conformity, conventional thinking, and a common existence. They had found their inner chutzpah, and they had decided to become educational equalizers. They had made up in their mind that they would put an end to educational apartheid once and for all and be the boom. So what is this boom? Well, Tobias Rossman, who is a research engineer at California Institute of Technology, says, when an object is in motion, the sound waves pile up in front of that object, especially as it reaches sonic velocity. If that object in motion has the right acceleration, it can burst through the sound waves. So what's heard on the ground is an explosion, boom, powerful pop. Another example of this, I live in Florida, and I remember vividly years ago when the space shuttle used to come back from outer space to Earth, landing in Cape Canaveral. You could have been laying in your bed on a Saturday morning, and all of a sudden you hear this boom, and you're like, what just happened? Who kicked me? And all it was the space shuttle breaking the sound barrier. And I said, whoa, that's amazing. What would it be like to find educators who said, you know what? Gone are the days of providing an average experience for young people. How do we create a brilliant experience? So Marceta and I, we started interviewing all of these educators, and one of the first educators that we met was Sheila Harity. Sheila Harity is a New England educated white woman that lives in the suburbs and drives a Volvo. When she took over her school right outside of Boston, it was the worst school in her city, and it was the worst performing vocational school in the state. And she said to herself, first of all, if I'm going to create the boom and break the sound barrier, I need to let the teachers know that it's not about me, it's about we. Because many of her students came from the projects, they took public transportation to get to the school, and many of them had come from a legacy of generational poverty. One of the things that she noticed was that in the suburban schools, the rigor was very high, the expectations was high. But in the urban school, where many of them were the least, the last, the lost, the rigor was low. So she decided to implement honors classes. And instead of saying there's no money, we don't have the budget for it, she decided to write a grant and to put in place advanced placement courses for her students. All of a sudden, the energy is now moving in the school. And she didn't stop there. She decided to go and partner with 350 businesses in the local area to create co-op internships for these students to give them a view and a vision of a better future. But she didn't stop there. They took the career insights, the teachers, looked at what was happening in those careers, and they began to embed into the classroom instruction those specific skills that students would need to break the sound barriers in their life. I believe what Sheila and her teachers did, they began to believe in students. Dr. Russ Quaglia, in his research, Student Voice, says that when students believe that the teacher believes in them and expects for them to succeed, they are 4 times more likely to put more effort in school because that teacher simply believes in them. After meeting with Sheila, we then went and interviewed Todd Neslony. Todd is an elementary school principal in South Rural Texas. And one of the challenges that he was facing in his school is that parents were not showing up, parents were not involved. So he told his teachers on a Saturday, he said, I want you to come to school, t-shirts, shorts, flip-flops. We're going to have high school students come and volunteer, and we're going to the apartment complex that's near the school where most of our kids and their families live. So on a Saturday morning, he and his teachers and all the volunteers from the high school show up in the parking lot, and they've got barbecue grills out. They're grilling hot dogs and hamburgers, and all of a sudden, parents started pouring out saying, what in the world are you doing here? Are you trying to get us to read to our kids 20 minutes a day? I mean, it's Saturday. Like, really, dude? Really? And he says, no. We're just here to love on you and to let you know that we care. And what we discovered is that Todd understood in breaking the sound barrier and releasing leadership brilliance was not about a hand out, but it was a hand up. But he didn't stop there because he recognized that men were not involved in his school. And what he discovered is that teachers had heard about poverty. Maybe they had seen poverty or even experienced poverty. So imagine all of a sudden students see their teachers in the parking lot of where they live, and they said, listen, come in, let me show you where I live. And all of a sudden, a teacher walks into a house where there's one bedroom and 7 people live there. All of a sudden, that teacher has an epiphany as to why homework is not done, why this child might be a little angry at school, and perhaps even missing their father. So Todd walked away from this experience, and he said, what else can we do to create a better relationship with the parents? So they decided to do an event called Celebrate the Gentleman, because they recognized that having men show up for donuts with dad was not working. So all of a sudden, they decided to put this event together, and they just thought maybe 100 men will show up. Well, they ended up having over 600 men show up for this event that represented every ethnicity in their school. And what he discovered is that men were sick and tired of being told what they were not doing. They just wanted somebody to see what they could do and what could be different. One of the school dads was so moved by this, he called his employer the next day, and he said, I need to take off a few hours every Wednesday to come and volunteer at the school. And what Todd discovered is that that one effort, that one movement created the boom that broke the sound barrier and built a better relationship with parents like never before. Another amazing story that we were deeply moved by is the story of Judy Marty. Judy is the principal of Mater Academy in Hialeah Gardens, Florida. 80% of her students that attend her school come from families where English is not their first language. 83% of the families in her school are in poverty. The first thing that happened is her teacher said, you know what, these students, forget about them. They can't do this rigor stuff. Let's just leave them where they are. And Judy said, absolutely not. We are not going to do that. So she decided to take the teachers to other schools that had students that were in poverty, but the rigor was higher. And she said, if they can do it, we can do it. So sure enough, she said, we have got to think in an unconventional manner. So whenever you walk into the school of Mater Academy, there's a college wall that shows where all of the seniors in that school have been accepted to college and what they plan to do as it relates to post-secondary education. And all of a sudden, students start to get a vision of what's possible for them. But they didn't stop there. Their doors open at 6 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. They have extended hours in the summer because they don't want the kids who have a great school year to get involved with gangs. So sure enough, they can come to Mater Academy. In addition to the extended hours, they also have extended library hours. And she said all of a sudden the temperature and the climate began to change in the school because the kids knew that somebody believed in them and gave them hope. When it came time for them to take the Florida State exam, 97% of her entire school passed the exam. In fact, 179 of the 500 students scored a perfect 5 on the Florida State exam, which is the highest score. But what's interesting, the state of Florida decided to investigate them for test fraud. They didn't believe that these students who were poor could make these scores. After they did the due diligence, the school was exonerated. And Judy said, it's because we believed in them. Gallup says in their research, the reason students drop out of school is because they give up hope. The reason they give up hope is they don't have a vision for a better future after graduation. So with no vision of a better future beyond school, they drop out of school, and eventually they drop out of life. Gallup scientists learned that hope predicts academic success and graduation better than test scores and grades. I believe that all of us have the ability and the opportunity to become the boom in education. Because what we discovered in talking with all of these leaders is they recognize that real leadership is not just about inspiring and motivating teachers to teach better, but real leadership is inviting people on a journey to discover themselves while they're following that leader. The reason the boom is so important, because in our world right now, the research says, according to the Society of Human Resource Management, that surveyed 15,000 human resource professionals in 72 countries, they're saying within the next few years, the economy is moving towards a project-based economy. And the reason that's so important is because young people that are in school right now are graduating into a world where they will have to create a job, not just do a job, because a job stands for just overboard. So the reason the boom is so important, because there are so many people that went to work 30 years ago and they settled for a chair, a check, and a cup of coffee in Cubicle Farm and woke up 30 years later and said, this doesn't quite work for me. The reason the boom is needed right now is because young people in school need to know a paycheck is given to a person who shows up, but opportunities are given to a person who works beyond what they're paid to do. I believe that we all have the opportunity to be the boom. Will you join me?